What's up, boys? Welcome to the second installment of What If Deku Had the Venom Symbiote. I'm sure if you made it to part 2, you probably enjoyed part 1. And I'm about to make the biggest ask of you guys. If you guys enjoyed part 1 and you didn't like the video, make sure to go back and do so, seeing as it helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. Seriously, one like is like giving me like $100 basically, with the way that YouTube's algorithm likes to work. And seeing as the YouTube algorithm hasn't been too good to me lately, it did mean a lot. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Immediately, Venom within Izuku would say, dodge. But Izuku just is like, what? And eventually Venom like throws him out of the way, right? He jumps out of the way. And from here, Izuku is just left to watch in horror as his entire classmates pretty much get teleported away, excluding the ones in the original who didn't get teleported like usual. This is when Kirishima and Bakugo then rush in. They're like, hey, they get teleported away as well. But they both were able to see something interesting, which is essentially that while they couldn't hit that particular part of Kurogiri, there was another part that they could have potentially hit. Taking note of this, they go through, yada, yada, yada. Everybody else gets teleported. Tsuyu and Mineta are safe on the boat. The villains start, thinking like, hey, we should go attack them. But I'm just going to say for the reason that I just want them to survive, that essentially the villains don't end up just jumping on the boat. They're unsure of what their quirks are, and they're just like, we'll just keep them trapped here anyways, right? So what ends up essentially happening is Izuku was able to just watch as Kurogiri single-handedly destroys 13. She would begin to use her black hole quirk, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys, that's not gonna do anything. I mean, we saw what happened in the original. Kurogiri straight reverse Uno'd her and said, no, you. And she proceeded to destroy herself. Following that, what Izuku did was shoot a tendril at Kurogiri, and this actually ended up catching that particular part of himself that was metal. He's able to drag Kurogiri back to himself, but Kurogiri just teleported Izuku down to where Aizawa was at fighting the villains. Following this, Aizawa would watch as, Deku just drops onto the ground, and then he's able to get himself back up, being like, I'm good. From here, he looks around to see all the villains, and Izuku would simply smirk before then thinking, come on, buddy. He says this out loud, actually. Aizawa hearing this is like, buddy. And from here, Izuku just goes on to cover himself with his, his Venom quirk, quote unquote. As his new outfit comes on and the villains seeing that, they're like, yo, that's kind of dope. But from here, Izuku goes on to create weapons with his hands, creating like double scythes and hammers, and he would go on to rush at these villains at speeds that they've never seen before, shoot webs and clobber them, just in absolute Venom fashion. We saw what happened in the movies with people with literal guns. They tried doing their best to, Eddie, but it didn't exactly quite work. The same thing applies to Izuku. I mean, these symbiotes, these villains weren't able to do a thing to Izuku. And in case you guys are wondering if I'm going to be including something like Carnage into the series or like Spider-Man or anything like that, I am not. It's not happening. I don't see any reason why we should include anything other than what the title of the video suggests. What if Deku had Venom? Venom alone. I know Venom could, technically produce Carnage, but come on, I just don't want to do that. That said though, what ends up essentially happening is Izuku just ends up getting on Kurogiri's Shigaraki's nerve. Shigaraki starts scratching his neck. He's like, Kurogiri, release the Nomu. It's not fair. It's not fair. He starts pouting, and essentially the Nomu would growl out loudly as it begins to essentially rush at Izuku's direction. Izuku would get punched away as it would fracture a couple of ribs, and Izuku would get healed rather quickly. From here, Izuku begins to essentially hold off the Nomu. And he would do so up until All Might arrives. Now, All Might arrives in, normal like fashion, ripping off his tie, saying, don't worry, guys, because I am here. With that iconic look that he had on that episode. It was so sick. It was so awesome, seriously. But following this, Shigaraki gets happy and he looks at All Might before then telling the Nomu to kill All Might. From here, All Might and the Nomu would get into a battle, and in the original, what ended up essentially happening was Todoroki came in, his ice was able to save All Might from essentially almost getting killed and being ripped in half by the Nomu. Instead, what I'm going to be having happen this time is Izuku looks at All Might and he's like, Venom, he doesn't have a lot of time left. You gotta help him. Venom would look at Izuku and tell him that he'll probably end up snatching a couple years away from All Might's life expectancy if he lunges onto him, since he's probably not a perfect match. And Izuku says, I don't care, he'll die now. So, Venom just lunges onto All Might, and All Might's like, what the? Before, losing strength for a second and then gaining it back tenfold. The Venom symbiote ends up absorbing All Might's quirk into itself, and All Might is able to rip the Nomu's grasp off of himself before jumping out of it and then going on to decimate the Nomu. Like, I mean it in the literalist sense of this word. He obliterates the Nomu. Could you just imagine how powerful All Might would be if he had a symbiote? That's essentially what happens, and it's insane. It's crazy. I mean, All Might and Venom working together for just a couple of seconds, All Might is able to realize, like, hey, this thing is insane. Not only that, but All Might also gets healed. Keep in mind, the Venom symbiote has the ability to heal people. It does heal All Might while also killing him at the same time. So the battle between Nomu and the All Might is a very, very short one. It literally spans from the second that All Might got the symbiote, a literal 30 seconds. All Might went on to decimate the Nomu, and as soon as All Might was out of, his grasp and the Nomu was punched to Kingdom Come, Team Rocket style, All Might had the Venom symbiote jump off of him. However, there's two things that came out of this. Number one, All Might was healed. Number two, the Venom symbiote now actually has access to that of One for All. So when it lunged back to Deku, Izuku just felt the power inside of the suit. It grew so much. Izuku felt as if he had the power to destroy mountains. He had immense power, because keep in mind, the symbiote's able to kind of copy its users. When it went onto Peter Parker, it was then able to, super strength, super speed, spider sense, yada, yada, yada. The Venom symbiote, what it did was essentially copy One for All. And I'm sorry if I'm talking super, super fast, but I'm just excited. I mean, think about it. Izuku with One for All, but not exactly getting One for All. That's kind of cracked. That's just what I think. Keep in mind, he's not going to be getting all the extra 7 quirks that All Might's true successor would get, just due to the fact that, I mean, All Might doesn't have that. So it just wouldn't make sense to give Izuku that. So what ends up essentially happening is, after this happens, the Nomu, gets blasted off. All Might would look at Shigaraki and, visibly look like a imminent danger to this man Shigaraki, but Kurogiri comes in and teleports them away in the nick of time after Snipe ends up shooting Shigaraki a couple of times. And then from there, what ends up happening is essentially the cleanup would happen. Later that day, All Might would ask Izuku to meet him somewhere, and they would have a little bit of a discussion about his quirk. They would do so, and All Might would ask Izuku questions about why it was that his quirk leaped onto him, and he was able to feel it as if it had sentience. You know what I mean? Izuku tells All Might that it's because it does. As Venom hops off of him, revealing the head of Venom, being like, "Hello, All Might." And from here, All Might's just like, "Oh wow, that's creepy." The Venom is just like, "We are Venom." And from here, All Might is like, noted. Venom goes back inside, and Izuku's like, yeah, it's basically my little buddy. And, Venom's just like, big buddy. And then Izuku's like, yeah, big buddy. From here, All Might is like, yeah, I heard it speaking to me, telling me that it was healing me. And he lifts his shirt up, going on to tell Izuku that before the Venom symbiote went on him, he was literally having issues with his quirk. He was even going to look for a successor. But now it seems that All Might was given more time. And All Might is extremely happy at this fact. I mean, now he's going to get a successor. He's healed. He has more time. He gets to be a pro hero longer. Just imagine that. He never thought that would have happened. He would then go on to tell Izuku if he's sure about that quirk of his. And Izuku would say that just because it's not from his body naturally, that doesn't mean it's bad. Going on to tell All Might that he knows all about that little quirk that he has inside of him. Venom could feel it. It was unnatural. All Might then begins to explain the truth about One for All, and Izuku and All Might both kind of come to an agreement of, you don't say nothing, I don't say nothing. So yeah, that's what happens. We're just gonna be doing a brief 1 week time skip, and Zuko just chills with Venom. I mean, Venom proceeds to feed a couple of times instead of by normally, just eating people. What Venom does is suck their life force out of them. So he goes and sees random criminals, and Izuku tells him, whatever, do your thing, but don't get caught. Venom does his thing, and yeah. Let's just let bygones be bygones, because Izuku's gonna save more people than he's killing, relatively. I mean, ultimately, due to the fact that he's putting bad criminals back in bars and stuff. So anyways, though, what ends up essentially happening following this is Izuku's actually told that he's gonna be the one to give the speech at the UA Sports Festival. Izuku would do so, and then the race would be announced. Now the race, it's going to be a little bit interesting. No, not really. It's kind of going to be the same thing. I mean, Todoroki and Bakugo are still going to be like the main ones who are in the lead. When Todoroki ends up stomping his foot down, like bam, like ice just covers everything. Essentially, Izuku's kind of spider sense thingy-majigger goes off, and he's able to jump over it, not actually getting caught off guard, using his webs to swing from the rooftop outside where the ice isn't there. This is when he begins running as fast as he can, covered in his Venom Symbiote costume, and then he uses his his tendrils to essentially leap off of the 0-pointers and kind of end up getting further than anybody else. What Izuku would do following this is just begin running, and once they get to that area where there's like holes in the ground and like it's really deep falls, Izuku just leaps from rock to rock, crossing the entire path, inevitably getting to the rock mine place thingamajigger and just running past all of the explosions without a care in the world, due to the fact that he's able to sense where exactly they are. Not only that, but coupled with his brand new speed and strength, Izuku's in a league of his own. It's incredible. I'm so sorry about that. It's incredible how far Izuku's been able to go with the things that he's had at his disposal. It's jaw-dropping almost. That said, however, Izuku does end up getting first place, and following this situation, they end up having the cavalry battle. Now, I don't see any reason why the cavalry battle should really change that much. And I hate covering it just because it's kind of boring. I mean, no, I'm just gonna replace the cavalry battle. Let's say the cavalry battle is replaced with another like capture the flag event, where essentially everybody who ended up passing onto the final fight was on one team, and everybody who failed was on another team. It was red team versus blue team, and inevitably blue team ended up winning and, taking the dub from red team, capturing the flag, making their way back, and, doing their thing ultimately. I think that's actually genuinely a good thing to leave it off on. I feel like it just works, so I'm just gonna leave it there. That said, though, what ends up happening following that event is how do I put this? Okay. So essentially what ends up happening following that is the final battles. Yeah, right, the final battles. So it's going to be the same as in canon because I really see no reason for it to change. So Q, Deku versus Shinso. All right, I'm going to go leaping right through this because there's no reason in hyping it up if it's not going to be a good battle. I mean, let's be realistic. Deku having Venom pretty much makes everything not a good battle, especially since, I mean, Bakugo still has a pretty good shot seeing as he has fire, and Todoroki does as well, but he doesn't use it, so I see no reason for that. So, Deku versus Shinso. Obviously, we know they both get to the arena, Shinso starts doing a little bit of smack talking, Deku enters back. We know that much would definitely happen for sure. Now, when this happens, keep in mind, Venom wasn't the one to talk back, so he's not under any mind control. Venom is able to freely move Izuku's body and just pound on Shinso, knocking him out and essentially winning the battle. So everybody was just wondering why Shinso just took a beating for no reason. But Shinso's pretty angry at Izuku following this, and he's like, yeah, whatever, you know what I mean? But following that, what ends up essentially happening is the next match gets called up. This time, Todoroki isn't able to just look at Deku and be like, are you All Might's secret love child? Because their quirks are not at all similar. This time, Deku has black goo, for crying out loud. So what ends up happening is essentially Todoroki just challenges Deku. Deku accepts. Bakugo challenges Deku and Todoroki. They both accept. And time skip to the battle between Todoroki and Izuku. I see this going down one of two ways. Number one, Izuku is able to simply use his webs to climb to the top of the iceberg that Todoroki would shoot at him. Or be able to just punch through it, similar to what Kirishima or Sato would do, where once the iceberg comes out of Izuku, using his newfound super strength, is able to just bam, 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 shatter the ice with no problem. Now, Izuku not only has the black substance around him, but he also has like this turquoise-ish, greenish glow around his costume due to the influence of One for All. Now, with Izuku having this newly found influence, Izuku was able to just rush towards Todoroki, just breaking any ice that he shot in front of him, until eventually Todoroki tried freezing him whole, but Izuku was able to just break out of it with sheer willpower and strength alone from Venom controlling him, and he just stood right in front of Todoroki, who shot fire at him that caused Izuku's symbiote to go back, like, it starts screeching, and Izuku was simply there taking the fire, but Todoroki, once hearing his father screaming "Shoto!" like a madman, was able to just quickly snap out of it and stop using his fire, as he pretty much ends up saying that he'll beat him with nothing but his ice. He tries it once more, and Deku was not about to just be like, "It's your quirk, not your dad's," because it wouldn't be in his favor to do that. He tried, but Venom was like, "Quiet, kid," and he told him that it was for his own good, from here going on to defeat Todoroki and taking the second dub. Last match, Bakugo versus Izuku. Now, Bakugo this time knows about that little weakness that Izuku has that nobody else was able to really notice. That fire weakness thing, yeah, he knows about it. By the way, one more thing I forgot to mention was President Mike's like loudness over the intercoms would definitely like bother Venom, causing him to be like, "Can we eat him now?" But Izuku would be like, "No, that's our teacher, dude. We can't just go around eating people." Venom would be like, "Nah." And from here, they go on to fight Bakugo. The way I see this final match going is essentially, since it's in an open space, Izuku has more room to dodge out of these giant explosions, but we all know that Bakugo's explosions can grow truly massive. So what I'm going to be saying happens is thinking in Bakugo's head. What would I do if I fought against a kid that had a symbiote that was so much stronger than me physically? Me personally, I would use my quirk to blast up into the air and then charge up one of my biggest explosions downwards to catch the kid off guard with the fire of the explosion. Obviously, it does end up doing a little something damage to Izuku, but what I think Izuku would do, generally speaking, is kind of play dead, like laying down. Bakugo lands down and Izuku would open one eye before then capturing Bakugo in his tendrils and then essentially slamming him to the ground over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And then the Venom Symbiote essentially crawls all the way onto Bakugo with Bakugo screaming, "What? No! Deku! Get this thing off me!" But it doesn't listen to him, and the symbiote just absorbs Bakugo's quirk, stays quiet, and then lunges back onto Izuku, who holds one hand out as his entire body begins getting covered in that dope Venom Symbiote silhouette. From here, he would look at Bakugo and say, "Hey Bakugo, night night," as he then proceeds to shoot the full-powered explosion at Bakugo's face that sends him crashing out of the arena, and causes Deku to catch this crispy, solid dub. Following this event, I'm thinking that we're just going to be jumping over to the pro hero name. For that, Deku's name is definitely going to be Venom. When it comes to his internship, Gran Torino, I just don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that. And why? Because he now technically has a part of One for All, and All Might is cool with Deku. He's cool with him seeing as he helped him get healed. He would tell that to Gran Torino, and Izuku would have a pretty good blast alongside Gran Torino. This arc essentially kind of is just a Deku training montage, and there's no real reason for me to elongate it, so we're going to be skipping it until eventually they get to the Nomu Hosu City incident. Izuku realizing that Ida acted a bit strange due to Venom's help, and him telling him that his friend is definitely out there somewhere with the hero killer, Izuku's able to quickly rush over to Ida's location and help reprimand the hero killer before anything could truly happen. Keep in mind, I would explain the battle, but due to the fact that Stain won't be able to even cut Izuku, I don't really feel the need to. Not only that, but Izuku's just way faster than Stain. He's able to outclass him in every shape, way, and form, so Izuku's able to just do his thing with Stain and have his way with him. No, but seriously though, he's able to beat him, and Venom would be pretty happy thinking, "Can we eat him?" Izuku would say, "No, Venom, we can't eat everybody." And Venom would be like, "You said we could eat people." Izuku just looks at him and says, all right, whatever. And then from here, they go on to imprison Stain before then going over towards the Nomus that they would have found in the alleyway with the wings. And Izuku jumps on him before then ripping off the wings off the Nomu's back and crashing onto the ground, holding the Nomu by the throat. Venom is able to just be like, I'm tired of this. I need food. And he would say, down the hatch. As he then goes on to swallow the Nomu whole, and Izuku's like, ugh, that was disgusting. No more of doing that. Venom is just like, huh, no more for you, at least. And then from here, they're able to essentially help out with the cleanup of the rest of the Nomus, which were low-grade Nomus, and seeing as he now has one for all, it's no real problem for somebody like Izuku. That said, what ends up happening from here is essentially the dog dude would end up thanking Izuku and Ida for their bravery. Since Todoroki isn't going to be present there to help, Izuku never got close to him, so he never sent him that message, which is a reason why I said Todoroki isn't there. But they inevitably end up returning back to school, and this is where they find out about the next big challenge, the final exams. Like for part 3!